Economics Institute in Oxford. Miriam, unfortunately, is not well, but Stephen Lawrence, musician and local Green Party member, has gallantly volunteered to leap into the breach. And as if you haven't had enough big ideas thrown at you already in this seed planting phase, we're now going to be hearing about where money comes from and what gives it value. Stephen, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Good morning. So the green sheet says key features of our current economic system. This was Miriam's title. And what needs to change. So I suppose if you just change the word economic and put financial, then that's probably what I'm going to be speaking about. I'd just like to actually concur with Rupert's last point that growth is a substitute, a very poor one for affairs. And it's one of the things that is keeping them, one of the only things that is keeping the current banking and corporate system going is I'm used to singing. My talk is in two parts. Part one is explaining where money, or how money is created, why we need to know why money is created and what money is. And the second part is what are the inherent weaknesses in such a system and what we might do about it, given what we've just learned and understood. So, one of the things we don't notice when we are growing up is this question of where money comes from, because it's the one thing that is noticeably absent from our educational curriculum. So we end up with literally a childish notion of money, because we have no other notion. So when you are understanding about the way money does work, it's difficult because you have to put away things that you've grown up with for the last however many years you are. However, I have been particularly obsessed by this notion ever since I came across it about 13, 14 years ago, and have been struggling since then to find a way to explain it in simple terms, simple enough, so that the listener can then explain it to somebody else. And that seems to me the most crucial point of any explanation. It's no use if it goes in one ear, comes out the other ear, and doesn't appear out through the mouth. So this is an attempt to transfer this knowledge. Supposing you've got a lot of cash in your pocket, so you decide very wisely to go to the bank because it's uncomfortable for you to be carrying it around. So you go to the cashier and you pay it in, and you expect that the £500, let's say, will be then credited to your account. And what we now need to do is to just ask ourselves, well, what is in my bank account? What is in there? If we now think about what goes on literally physically, the money stays behind the counter. So what is in your bank account is really not money, it must be something else. And simplest of all, we could describe what is in your bank account as a piece of paper, which has a number written on it. In this case, it's 500. So that piece of paper represents the amount of wealth that the bank is prepared to give you back again, should you ask for it. So if I go into a cash machine and I ask for £50, message goes back to headquarters of the bank and it says, can you please read out the number on the piece of paper? Is it bigger than 50? And the answer comes back, yes. That's fine, you get the money out of the wall, and someone back at headquarters takes out a pencil and changes the number from 500 to 450. Okay? So that, in essence, is what is going on, and that doesn't really take too much of a change of mindset. We know that that is what happens. Okay? Now, if that were the only thing going on, then you could see that the total amount of money in the economy would be exactly the same as the total amount of physical cash that has been deposited in bank accounts. So the total amount of money would be the total amount which is in bills, in wallets, the total amount which is behind the counter in the bank, and the total amount behind the counter in the bank would equal the total amount in everybody's account. So we haven't actually created any means of making money at the moment. So we need to think of some other system, and that's what's missing from our understanding. The reason why it's so important to understand where it comes from is because the system is now broken, and because we're a democracy, the only way we can fix it is really using a democratic means. If we want to leave the decision to unelected politicians, unelected bureaucrats or politicians who don't know or that we can't argue with, then we'll get some other system which is equally useless. So we must understand what basically is going on so we can hold everybody else to account. So, we moved from a piece of paper with a number on it, and the next idea I'm going to take you to is a casino. And when you go to a casino, in order to do your gambling, you normally go to a cashier, you give them some money, or you make a credit card payment or whatever, and they give you some chips. And you play with your chips, and at the end of the evening, you take your chips back to the cashier. And they either give you money or they credit your account. So, in a little way, going to the bank and putting your money in is a bit like the bank giving you some chips with which to do some trading with. But your chips are not physical chips, they are held in your bank account. And you can then move those chips to somebody else's bank account and thereby pay them some money. So each chip is kind of like worth £1, or if it was in the States, $1, or somewhere else, €1. And the brilliance of the system is, if we take a very simple example, supposing I have an account with a bank and somebody else has an account with the same bank, and I make a payment to them using a cheque or something like that. So I had £500 in my account, if I remember rightly. So I'm writing them a cheque for £50. And what happens is that someone takes out their pencil, they change my 500 to 450, and then they change the other person's number and add 50 to that, and that's all that happens. The brilliance of the banking system, actually it's rather a cooperative one, because what they did was they allowed the chips that are issued by one bank to be accepted by any other bank. And thereby, the whole system gained in value, gained in usefulness, because if you think of a system whereby we each had our own bank, and we could only pay people who were banked at the same bank, it wouldn't actually be very useful. But now we have to work out what happens if I write a cheque to somebody who banks with another bank. Pencil comes out, my bank, and the £50 is knocked off. Pencil comes out of the other bank, and the £50 is put on. But that's not where the story ends. Now, the person at the other bank, he now has a greater claim on his bank's wealth. I have a lesser claim on my bank's wealth, because I now can't, if I go to my cash point and I now type in, I want to take out £460, the bank will not allow me to do so. However, the other person may now go to his hole in the wall and type in £50, and he is now allowed to take the money out. So what has happened is that now my bank has given the other person's bank some genuine wealth, which can now be claimed, which can now be drawn against. Let's go back to where we started from. I had £500, I went to the bank, I gave it to the bank, and then the bank credited, they put a number on a piece of paper, and that number was 500. And that number told the bank that I was able to draw on £500 worth of its wealth. Okay? And I've also given it some wealth that it can do that with. I've given it some £500. If for some reason, let me see. So if I have £500 in my account, or I have the number 500, the bank must have the wealth in order to service that account. If I'm in another bank, that bank is going to want to see some wealth for which it can service this person, because this person is going to turn up on the wall and is going to ask for his £50. Well, where's the £50 going to come from? So in this case, the simplest thing to do is Bank A to give Bank B £50 cash, literally physical. So something has to move from one bank to the other bank. Given that system, now we have a system whereby money can move between banks, and the whole system is now a global system, and it doesn't matter where I am, which bank I'm with. We now have a transaction system. Actually, the transaction system is not really based on money at all. It's a transaction system between these different banks. At the end of each day, lots and lots of checks going around, lots and lots of payments, and at the end of the day, the banking system works out how much does Bank A owe Bank B, how much does Bank A owe Bank C, how much does Bank B owe Bank D, etc. At the end of the day, they all move their money around. Literally, that's when the wealth, that's why you have the end of the banking day that happens at 4:30, and at that time, let's work out how to settle our accounts between all the banks. Now, we still haven't created at the moment any method of actually making more money. We've only got the amount of money that we had printed physically in the first place. Supposing you went into your casino again, and instead of giving the cashier some real money in exchange for tokens, you went into the cashier and you said, could I possibly borrow 100 tokens for gambling tonight, and then I can pay you back at the end of the day, because I'm feeling particularly lucky today, so I'm pretty sure I'm going to come back with 200 anyway. And the cashier says, well, all right, you have 100, and you're going to return those 100 at the end of the day, plus, let's say, an extra 10. And by the way, can you give me your address? And so that if you don't return the tokens, we can send the bailiffs around and recover some items that we can use to repay the debt. This is a bit like what banks do. I think one can feel now that there's no reason why the casino ought not to do this. There's nothing stopping it just making some more tokens, as long as it's got enough genuine wealth. As if I come back with 5,000 after having gambled with 100, if it doesn't mind parting with £5,000 worth of cash, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with it. Printing or making these tokens without a payment being made in. Exactly the same is true with a bank. As long as not everybody at the same time decides to go to a cold law and ask for all their money out, things are fine. Being able to move money between bank accounts is a sufficiently useful thing that we actually prefer to keep money in the bank account rather than as physical cash. So if I go to a bank and I want to borrow £1,000, the bank doesn't actually have to give me any money at all. It simply gets out a pencil and writes 1,000 on a piece of paper. And it then says to me, okay, I have given you temporarily claim over £1,000 of bank's wealth. I'm a wealthy bank. I can do that. That's fine. We'll come to an agreement. You'll pay it back over a couple of years, and the amount you'll pay back will be whatever it is, 1,000 plus a little bit. Problem solved. So the question now comes to, well, exactly how much extra numbers can be written on pieces of paper before the system goes into meltdown. I suppose you can read your Financial Times of 2008 and you realise that somewhere around about then, that's the time it went into meltdown. Effectively, what we're saying is, how much real assets does the bank have? And then we can multiply that by some amount, let's say 10, 20, 30, and that's about the number of units of currency we can have floating around in people's accounts, and the system still works without people suddenly all turning up at the bank at the same time, demanding, as it were, their money. So that's basically how the system works, and it may be difficult to take in, especially because when we're young, we come to some other idea about how the system works. However, we now have to go on to part 2 of the talk, which is, having discovered this, what are the downsides? And the first downside is that the system does not work in a steady state. It either has to get bigger or it has to get smaller. Today, it's getting smaller. Up till a few years ago, it was getting bigger. Why is this the case? Now we have to go to an auction house. Several people are bidding on an item. The price of the item depends on how much they want it, how many people are bidding for it, how much money they have to bid for it. The more money they have, higher the price goes. Now, suppose, if you think about what the bank has in terms of wealth, banknotes, physical banknotes, are a pretty small part of what banks have in terms of things which are of value. Most of the things they have which are of value are things like shares, things like property, mortgage agreements, etc., bank bonds, treasury bonds, corporate bonds, etc., etc., etc. All these things have prices associated with them. And the prices fixed to any one of these assets is dependent on how much people are prepared to pay for those assets. Now we go back to the auction house. The more money that there is swirling around the economy, the higher the prices of the assets. So at this point the banks thinks, aha, now our assets are worth more. It's safe now to lend out, to print out a few more tokens, write a few more numbers on pieces of paper, and thereby the money supply increases a bit. That enables people to bid more for their assets, and so the process goes on. It also works in the true fashion of any differential equation, as mathematicians will know. It works on reverse tuning. If the asset prices starts to fall, then the banks think, now we have too much money in our accounts. If people start to come along and demand their money, we have not got enough assets to fulfill their demands. So we must now start to reduce the amount of money that we lend out. And that's where we are today. And so it goes on. The less money there is in the economy, the faster prices fall, the less bank assets are worth, and the more they have to reduce their lending. So that is basically the problem with the current system, is that it either has to get bigger or smaller. And therefore, we have to find an alternative so that we can cope with the third condition where we have stasis. And we also want a system whereby if there is contraction, which is quite possible, we want to make sure that when it does contract, it contracts in a fair way, rather than in a way which basically ends up with a selected number of people ending up with absolutely nothing at all, and another select number of people ending up either where they were or still better off. So managing our contraction is an important part of the new system. I want to just go through another few problems and inherent features of the current system. It always amuses me that when you make, if you have some, as it were, spare cash and you want to put it into a savings bank, it's interesting to remember the fact that all the money that you're about to put into your savings account has been borrowed by somebody else. And if they didn't borrow it, it wouldn't be there for you to save. So, in a way, what we want, at least it is my intention is what we want, is that we want some more what I would call neutral money. Neutral money is money that just exists and circulates. Neutral money is what we think money always was in the first place. Cash is neutral money. It does not disappear, it just goes round and round and round. Money in people's bank accounts is not neutral money because it's loaned into existence, and when people give it back, that's the end of it. It doesn't circulate. That needs to be explained before I end, because otherwise you'll be still a bit in a mystery. I've gone into my casino. I borrowed the chips. I've won exactly the number that I needed. I think we decided it was about 110, so I've got 110 chips. And I give them all back to the cashier at the end of the night. Now, the casino does not have any more money. It has not made any money out of me at all. It does not have, suddenly, 110 chips that has appeared from nowhere. It made them in the first place, so it hasn't made anything. Same thing with a bank. When it makes a loan to me of £1,000, it's temporarily giving me control over £1,000 worth of its assets. At the end of that 2-year time, I relinquish control over those assets. End of story. Money has disappeared. If the money is to come out again, somebody else has to be persuaded to borrow another £1,000 under the same conditions that they will return £1,000 plus a little bit. And if they don't like the creditworthiness of this new person who comes round, the money is not going to get loaned into existence, and so the money supply shrinks. I hope there are one or two of you who have not been entirely baffled with what I'm saying. Do please come and talk to me afterwards. Thank you very much.